This is the matriarchy of European royalty, three sisters whose birth forced the abolition of the Salic law in their country, Denmark, so that the eldest could reign. King Frederick IX of Denmark and his wife, Queen Ingrid, hoped until the last moment that a boy would be born, but instead three daughters were born: Margrethe, the heiress, Benedicta and Anne-Marie. They have a wonderful relationship, full of complicity. Margrethe, the eldest and heiress, was born at Amalienborg Palace, the residence of the Danish royal family, on April 16, 1940. Her father had not yet ascended the throne. These were dark times. World War II had just begun. Margrethe was born just a week after the German tanks entered the country. Margrethe of Denmark, who had just celebrated her 50th anniversary on the throne, was a symbol of hope. 4 years later, Benedicta, the second of the sisters, was born. It was April 29, 1944. She was expected to be a boy, but her appearance raised concerns about the succession to the throne. Finally, the youngest child, Anna-Maria, was born on August 30, 1946 and was a cause for great joy after the liberation of Denmark and the end of the war. But the birth of Anne-Marie marked the beginning of a process that was to end in 1953 with the repeal of the Salic law. The Danes were convinced that their queen would have no more children, which is exactly what happened. The age difference between the three sisters is very small, but even so, it marked certain differences between them. Margrethe and Benedicta have a difference of 4 years, and this distanced them from each other as children. With Anne-Marie, Benedicta is 2 years older, which made them great allies and friends. Queen Margrethe explains in a biography published in 2019, "Benedicta is 4 years younger than me, which is a big age difference while you're almost an adult." 2 years later, Anne-Marie was born, and they were both attached to each other in very different ways. Although we grew up in a family where we lived together every day, there was actually a great distance between us. The fact that from adolescence Margaret's education was geared toward her future as a queen also played a role. She graduated from Cambridge University with a degree in prehistoric archaeology and received political training at Aarhus University, the Sorbonne and the London School of Economics. Only she attended university, although all three sisters spent their childhoods in similar boarding schools. Then came the question of her marriage. The choice of the candidate, the French diplomat Henri Laborde, whom Marguerite had met in London in the mid-1960s, was not received favorably by the Danes. They thought he was the wrong man and that a morganatic marriage was not to be expected. But Margrethe brought their love story to an end, and on June 10, 1967, the couple were married. Henry was granted the title of Prince of Denmark, but he always felt estranged from the Danes. Once Margrethe became Queen Margrethe, her husband refused to accept the secondary position she was entitled to, but Margrethe was always at his side and protected him from the royal family. The prince died in 2018. He had suffered from senile dementia for several years. At her husband's funeral, Margaret shed the first and only tears she had ever shed in public. Marguerite had always shown great intellectual restlessness, which brought her comfort. She was a great lover of art, created fashion models, translated books, and very clearly declared that she would not abdicate. The birth of Benedicta was a disappointment to the Danes, who were expecting an heir. But although the prince was not expected, Princess Benedicta was Queen Margrethe's best supporter. By her own admission, she is the most regal of the three sisters. Disciplined, serious, rigid, always attentive to her royal duties, which she never abandoned even when she married. Her marriage, in fact, was not a happy one. Her husband belonged to the nobility. He was Prince Richard zu Sayn-Wittgenstein-Broberg, one of Germany's most important dynasties, whose origins go back to the 16th century. Benedicta and Richard met at the wedding of Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands in 1966, and they immediately considered marriage. But the decision caused much controversy in Denmark. It was only 20 years after the Nazi occupation, and the Danes found it unacceptable for one of their princesses to marry a German. Benedicta was second in line to the throne. Months of difficult negotiations followed, and in the end it was decided that, if Benedicta proved to be the most direct heir to the throne, the marriage should take place in Denmark and Richard should renounce his citizenship. Their children were to be educated in Denmark in order to be eligible to inherit. The wedding took place on February 3, 1968. The couple settled in the ancestral castle of St. Wittgenstein in Germany, and Benedicta gradually receded in her inheritance rights because of the birth of her nephews, Prince Frederick and Prince Joachim. They therefore remained in Germany. They had 3 children, Gustavo, born in 1969, Alejandra, in 1970, and Natalia, in 1975. None of them belonged to the line of succession to the throne, because they were all educated in Germany. The couple stayed married for nearly 50 years, but it was not very harmonious. Benedicta attended all official events in Denmark, even though she lived in Germany, and spent her days traveling. For example, she never missed the Queen's New Year's reception in January. Royal duties were paramount to her. She was an invaluable assistant to Margrethe. But her family life suffered. Richard himself stated publicly that Benedicta was anything but sweet to him, and that the two were like night and day. "Sometimes I'm surprised we had children," he said in an interview. Ricardo died of cancer in March 2017. Benedicta was not by his side at the time of his death. Before he died, Ricardo said he didn't like sick people. The birth of Anna Maria, the youngest child, on August 30, 1946, brought joy to the Danes, whose country had been liberated from German occupation just a few months earlier. Shortly thereafter, the process of repealing the Salic law began, as everyone was convinced that there would be no more coveted male children. Anna Maria was the first to marry. She was only 18 years old, but everything was clear from the moment she met Prince Constantine of Greece at the age of 13. She wrote letters to him from her boarding house in Switzerland, but everything was shrouded in great secrecy because of Anne-Marie's tender age. Her parents didn't even want to hear about it until photos in the press revealed their relationship, and the engagement was announced when Anne-Marie turned 18. The wedding took place in Athens on September 18, 1964. Anne-Marie embraced the Orthodox faith and renounced her rights to the Danish throne. After the wedding she became Queen of Greece, the youngest in Europe. Anna Maria is the only one of the 3 sisters who led a life far removed from the royal obligations that disappeared for her when she went into exile after the military coup that ended the monarchy in 1973. She focused on caring for her 5 children, Alexia, born in 1965, Pablo in 1967, Nicholas in 1969, Theodore in 1983 and Felipe in 1986.